No spy in American history has a reputation as damaging or as deceptive as Robert Hanssen. He took advantage of his trusted position as an FBI agent to divulge millions of dollars worth of classified secrets to the Russians. The espionage lasted for decades, spurred on by a secret coding system and an underground international relationship with the KGB. Because of Hanssen, thousands of top-secret documents were leaked, which compromised the integrity of the FBI and posed a threat to the entire security of the nation. Join us on the investigation as we dig into how this lone soldier got away with a continuous string of betrayal. In most American cases of espionage recorded by the FBI, an international spy has attempted to infiltrate and distribute the nation's secrets from abroad, whether by digital reconnaissance, or in other words, expert hacking, or blackmailing contacts on the inside. Criminally minded individuals with an agenda have tried to steal American secrets for years. A particular pattern of Eastern European cyber espionage has emerged over the recent decades. However, that's not why Robert Hanssen made headlines. He flipped the norm. Rather than being the target of underground international recruitment efforts, he was the one taking initiative. Hanssen was no scapegoat, he was the mastermind. It wasn't a case of the Chicago-born Hanssen undertaking a life of crime from the get-go, but rather a sudden twist of fate. Long before Hanssen found himself in hot water immersed within an international web of crime, he was a dedicated public servant. Following earning a bachelor's degree in chemistry in 1966 at Illinois' Knox College, he dabbled in a number of fields. He enrolled in dental school, then switched his sights to business, and then accounting, before eventually joining the Chicago Police Department as an internal affairs investigator. For the better part of 5 years, Robert specialized in forensic accounting with the Chicago PD before climbing the ranks and landing a job with the FBI in Illinois in January of 1976. There was little reason not to hire Robert. He'd been a loyal police officer who had demonstrated an appreciation for law and order. Just a single year after joining one of the nation's most trusted government security entities, the other two of course being the CIA and the NSA, Robert Hanssen was transferred to the Counterintelligence Division. His main duty, to compile a thorough database of Soviet intelligence for the Bureau. From there, all the way up until the events of 2001, which we'll get to in a moment, Robert Hanssen remained an FBI employee, wading in and out of the criminal world the entire way through. It was in 1979, 3 years after joining the FBI, that Robert Hanssen first crossed the line, a line which he could never come back from. He approached the Soviet Main Intelligence Directorate, otherwise known as GRU, and offered to leak FBI secrets to the Soviets in exchange for cash. According to later testimony, there was no political motivation. The only thing he was after was a sizable extra amount of disposable income. Hanssen had a wife, Bernadette, and 6 children which he wanted to support. Hanssen and the Soviets each needed to hold up their part of the agreement. He delivered his end of the bargain, providing details of the where and when the FBI had placed audio bugging equipment, as well as a list of who the FBI considered to be Soviet intelligence agents. The Soviets delivered their end too, in the form of cash, just as promised. In 1981, Hanssen was transferred to FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C., which is precisely when he took his involvement as a spy to the next level. Now, with the power of the FBI's budget office at his disposal, he had access to far more FBI operations. With the expertise and experience as a counterintelligence agent under his belt, he had the upper hand. He knew the best ways to avoid detection because he knew where the investigators always focused their attention. Within his first year in the Washington office, Hanssen sent another anonymous letter, not to the GRU this time, but to the KGB, which was the Soviet Union's secret police force until its eventual dissolving. Within this letter, dated October 1st, 1985, he revealed to the Soviets the names of 3 KGB agents who were secretly in cahoots with the FBI. Their names? Sergei Matorin, Valery Martinov, and Boris Yuzin. Those names were a gesture of good faith and showed that he meant business. Following on, he asked the KGB for $100,000 in return for future reconnaissance. They accepted, and the unknowing KGB-FBI relationship was born. On more than 20 separate occasions, Hanssen subtly left packages for the KGB and its successor agency, the SVR, at drop-off sites scattered all over the Washington area. But it wasn't a simple meet and greet. Hanssen couldn't afford to be that obvious, and he couldn't afford to turn up to locations assigned by the Soviets. So he chose the drop sites and created his own secret coding system. When communicating with the Washington-based Soviet representatives, he would go by the alias of Ramon Garcia. Ramon would signal the drop locations, the places where he'd leave the information for someone else to collect, but would communicate the time and date in a cryptic code. 6 was to be added to the month, day, and time of any designated arranged drop. If a drop was scheduled for January 6th at 1 p.m., which would have been written out as 01-06 at 1 p.m., it would have instead been presented as 07-12 at 7 p.m. or July 12th at 7 p.m. Across all of these exchanges, Hansen was rewarded with bags of diamonds and wads of cash totaling more than $1.4 million, considering that he was offloading dozens of classified U.S. government documents, as well as revealing the intricate techniques, sources, methods, and operations of the FBI counterintelligence investigative team. The KGB had no problem handing over the money. Across his tenure as a spy, Hansen unlawfully shared more than 6,000 pages of valuable and confidential material. You might be thinking, why Russia? Why GRU and the KGB? Hansen never indicated any political or ideological motive for his actions, only financial. He had already studied the Soviets, and therefore had the bait to dangle in front of them. He was already knee-deep in Soviet-related reconnaissance, so taking the next step was easy. They were willing to buy U.S. secrets, and he was willing to sell them, all the way up until his eventual capture in 2001. Once the FBI supervisors received tips regarding Hansen acting suspicious from his coworkers, they started to keep an eye on him. As the suspicions grew, so did the investigations. In 1994, the FBI and the CIA formed a joint mole hunting team to find the suspected intelligence leak. They created a list of all agents known to have access to cases that were previously compromised. And on that list, of course, was Hansen. In order to weed out the spy, the FBI paid $7 million to a KGB agent to obtain a file that would give them hints as to who was the anonymous mole. With access to this data, the FBI was able to conduct fingerprint and voice analysis and determine that Robert Hansen was likely the guy that they'd been searching for. In January of 2001, Robert Hansen was assigned an assistant, Eric O'Neill, who in reality was a surveillance specialist, who had been ordered to keep one eye on Hansen's shady moves at all times. When O'Neill was able to briefly obtain Hansen's handheld PC, agents downloaded its contents, and the FBI now had its smoking gun. They then needed one final incriminating act in order to take Hansen down. That act was served to them on a silver platter 1 month later on February 18, 2001. As was his usual routine, Hansen took a sealed garbage bag of classified material and taped it to the underside of a wooden footbridge. The FBI was watching, and this was all the proof they needed, quickly rushing in to arrest him. When placed in cuffs, Hansen didn't fight back or try to run. He simply asked, quote, "What took you so long?" The agents found a bag nearby containing $50,000 that they believed to be Hansen's payment for the documents. The arrest was made, and the FBI finally captured their mole, following decades of espionage. After unearthing their traitor, the FBI's reaction was as disappointing as anyone would have expected. Here's what then FBI Director Louis J. Freeh had to say. A betrayal of trust by an FBI agent who was not only sworn to enforce the law, but specifically to help protect our nation's security is particularly abhorrent. This kind of criminal conduct represents the most traitorous action imaginable against a country governed by the rule of law. It also strikes at the heart of everything the FBI represents. The commitment of over 28,000 honest and dedicated men and women in the FBI who work diligently to earn the trust and confidence of the American people every day. On July 6, 2001, Robert Hansen pleaded guilty to 14 counts of espionage and 1 count of conspiracy to commit espionage, and was handed 15 consecutive sentences of life in prison without the possibility of parole. He did apologize for his behavior and stated that he was ashamed of his former actions, but that doesn't unwind the damage that was already done. From beginning to end, Hansen was compensated $1.4 million in cash and diamonds, the equivalent of just over $2 million by today's standards, for leaking thousands of vital American secrets, even though he now sits behind bars in a maximum security prison near Florence, Colorado. In solitary isolation for 23 hours a day, the damage of his actions cannot be undone. Could he have had another underlying financial agenda? Perhaps he was planning to take off with his family and escape to an exotic island. Or maybe he hoped to continue spying until his eventual retirement. What do you think? This fascinating story of betrayal has spread much further than the traditional 15 seconds of fame media outlets. Because of his extreme antics and the unmatched severity of his crimes, Robert Hansen has been documented in a number of films since his arrest. And yes, you can watch them. Master Spy, The Robert Hansen Story, was a made-for-television movie released in 2002 that stars William Hurt as Hansen. When this was released, the real Hansen was already behind bars. Remarkably, the guards granted him approval to watch the movie for himself, but he was so angered by it that he switched it off. There's another film, called Breach, which came out in 2007 that highlights the role of Eric O'Neill, the supposed assistant who was actually assigned to dig up dirt on his boss. And if you're still after more, then check out the 2007 documentary called Super Spy: The Man Who Betrayed the West. It dives into the hunt to trap and catch Hansen in the act. Is it possible that we could see another spy recreate the astronomical impact of Hansen? Some 20 years later, criminals are always looking for new and innovative ways to steal and deceive. But on the flip side, the FBI is now acutely aware of the telltale signs of a mole. As a direct result of Hansen's actions, the FBI director ordered a comprehensive review of information and personal security programs in the FBI. We won't know if there's another spy until they slip up and accidentally